So Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. All right, so let's talk about come. Let's talk about coming. So the physical act of coming, I want to also just say I have notes on my phone. Tonight I'm kind of just going with the flow as far as if I'm writing things up in advance or having some brief lines and then kind of going off of that. So I'm kind of just going with the flow. So I've got something written up tonight. I may also eventually post this with a video too, or try to always do that, like a sum up of the video. So if you can't watch, you could read. But let's jump in. Come, what and when? Come, the physical act of coming. So typically your body sees where it's going, hey? Walking into another room, you go to a friend's house, you go out to dinner. But what about our hearts? How can our hearts come? So like real talk, is Facebook a room you can go into? A place you can see? Do you realize that when you scroll, read, or even think that you're coming? It's easy to think about our bodies going somewhere. They physically get up and they move. Although it looks differently, do you ever stop and think about how our minds go places too? I mean, we must, because lost in thought is even a saying, but do we actually realize what that means? By looking at how our hearts and minds can be carried away quickly by distraction, joy, and anger, and excitement and expectation, we're recognizing that our hearts can go places too. We can't see the wind, joy, or God, but we can still come. Okay, so what about when? Anytime, all the time. But what does that actually mean? We'll have a beautiful conversation soon about both and. The coming in the secret place and the coming in the day-to-day midst, and how both are essential. But for right now, I really want to discuss like a regular habit, or rather a rhythm of coming. Okay, so I want to do an analogy like doing dishes. So I'm standing at the sink, my kids are sleeping, my hands are busy, so what about my mind? What will I do? To be honest, for me personally, I love silence. This is something that, if you know me well, you know that I don't even listen to lots of podcasts. I love music so much, but I'm just often spending time in silence. And I want to say that silence is also one of the spiritual disciplines. And in and of itself, silence can be beholding prayer. And again, that's something we'll talk about kind of down the road, but I wanted to put that in there. And silence is something that was stirred in me after I spent a lot of time with Benedictine sisters in my time in Ireland. To lean into silence, to lean into the not thinking, but being place, being here where the Spirit of God occupies, and just be with Him. So the practice of silence is one thing can do with our minds. And again, it's not nothingness, but it's the space where, entering into space where the Lord is. But silence is really is a practice. It's really something I kind of have to, I definitely I didn't spend time in silence overnight, let alone enjoy it overnight. So if we're not starting at silence, we can start at just talking to Jesus. So a question I kind of want to ask is, why don't we do that more? Especially in the mundane, in the midst things like what we're talking about in this analogy of like, this example of like when we're doing dishes. And if you talk to Jesus all the time, you're doing doing dishes, that is awesome. That is amazing. Kind of just using this as like an analogy of coming up with something that is a normal day-to-day human thing that we do. And how can we open ourselves up to our hearts coming to him in those things. Okay, so let's continue on. This place is where that question that I asked us last week comes into play about expectations. One reason that we hesitate to come to God in the midst of our very human daily activities and mundane moments. Is it because we think that God expects more than that from us? More than just our humanness? And maybe if we had spent some one-on-one time with him, we could come now while doing dishes, but since we haven't, then where would we start? Does anybody else ever feel that way? Like you aren't even trying to be religious about it. You know it's not about what you do. You know that you can't strive yourself into his presence. And yet I get caught up thinking if I haven't been as faithful to him in devotion lately that I can't just come to him in the plain mundane. I know it in my head, but my heart is still getting there. And do you know what that lie does? It holds me back from being with my Father. Because we can so easily toss on a show. My favorite's House Hunters International, of course. So good. Jesse and I are not into like other certain sitcoms or whatever, but oh gosh, anyways. Or call a friend while doing dishes. Am I possibly not seeking conversation with Jesus in that moment like I would by calling up a friend because I don't actually believe that a dishes chat is what he desires? That it isn't enough? Are we not seeking God in the mundane because we don't think that it is enough? What if we change that belief system? If you feel like a belief pattern that maybe you've fallen into, what if we were to change that belief system? From the place of seeing Jesus rightly, knowing and believing that his love is based on nothing. Because if it were based on something, it could change. And what if I believed that he wants to be with me and that the weariness of my soul, that is all easily too often numbed by going to those places that our heart goes to, like I mentioned before, like TV, nothingness, scrolling, shopping, things like that the numbingness, that the weariness of my soul is actually craving Jesus. Jesus, the place. If the invitation is to come, then he is inviting us to a place. Okay, imagine with me for a moment. Our imagination is so good, given to us by God, and as he continues to renew our minds in Jesus, it's such a beautiful way to encounter our Lord. So your body lives in a house or an apartment, something that you call home. And I want to ask you a question. Where is your heart's home? Have you ever asked yourself that before? Maybe you ask yourself that every day, and that's great. But where does your heart actually live? Jesus has been exposing something that Jesus has been doing in my heart over started about a year ago, is exposing defaults that I go to in my life, that my heart and my mind go to. And I love it when he exposes things, because it is always unto digging up and getting out so that he can sow and water and grow more of himself. So shining his light and exposing things is so good. It's actually so sweet. But I've realized that I have these default buttons. So when I get overwhelmed, when I get overstimulated, when I get in difficult circumstance, or I don't understand something, that I kind of hit these buttons, and I definitely overwhelm in difficult, like when I'm overwhelmed, I'm like, I go to default of like, stress or anxiety, or when I'm feeling stress, anxiety, then I hit the default button of overwhelm. But fear and worry and shame and guilt, depending on the circumstance I'm in, are other, just like these default buttons that I push, or places that my heart goes to. But Papa God asks us to go to him. The invitation is to him. And if we explore this idea that he is a place, and that means that other things that things that I am going into are they places too. So the place of fear is a barren land. What is the place that you go to? I'd like you to insert it here. Blank is a barren land, filled with thorns and valleys and darkness and absolutely no food. I pant and I am unsatisfied, wasting away from thirst. I'd like you to close your eyes and picture yourself walking around it. Place your hand on your ribs. You feel them. Your body is starving. You dig a hole in the sand, the only place to attempt to find shelter from the dark and cold. This is what fear is to our soul. This is what whatever you inserted there is to our soul. Now, peace is a man. His name is Jesus. Jesus is bread and wine and a garden. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Feel the river that flows through the garden, brushing past your feet. You bend down, you dip your hand in. Cupping it, you collect enough water for a sip, and you bring it to your mouth. As you drink, you feel the cold water rush down your throat, and in an instant, bringing revival to your body, refreshing to every part of your being. You feel the energy surge through you, and you lean your head back and laugh. You start to run. First along the river, and then in it. And it brings you to a waterfall. The sun glistens on it, and the beauty is too much. You begin to tear up a little bit. And then you smell something. You look to the direction of this fragrance, and you see flowers budding everywhere. You reach up into a tree, and you pick a bright colored fruit. You taste it. It has the most incredible flavor that you've ever tasted. Jesus is the place. He is a literal place to go to when you are weary. He is to your soul like a waterfall and a garden is to your body. Feel free to just keep your eyes closed and just stay in that place as your spirit feels and recognizes the stark difference between a barren land and a garden. And as I just wrap up tonight, that we're together just kind of just chewing on this concept of coming. And if Jesus invites us to come, then it's something, like I said last week, that's not a suggestion, but something we really want to do. We want to answer that invitation. And it's a practice. It's something that we use our imagination for, and that we need God in order to do, because He is the unseen God. Having that kind of parallel between like our hearts actually go or come to things that are unseen all the time, and that we would lean into this practice of coming to Him. And I'm really excited for next week. I'm going to talk more about this how. What can that look like in the midst of the mundane and the day-to-day. Thanks, guys. I love you.